So I was watching a pretty old video by Gary Orsom, and I wanted to touch upon something about a point that was made in a video he responded to. Though Gary did a pretty good job, there was another point I wish to make. Let me roll the clip and I will expand.
If you're a guy and you're feeling threatened, I do understand, but at the same time, you have had the top billing for centuries and the pendulum needs to swing. You in the past may indeed have been promoted simply because you're a man. So it's time that that swings not the other way, but at least swings halfway so it's fair and equitable.
Now you see what she did there. This argument makes no sense if you look at people like a group of individuals. But if you create people into monoliths, it makes perfect sense. The problem is we are not monoliths. Men nor women, blacks nor whites. Let's put together an analogy. Let's say I'm a homeless man, and rarely I get to eat and oftentimes have a hard time finding shelter for the night. Then comes along this person saying, "Why do you need to eat? Your gender has had something to eat and a place to stay for literally centuries." As if my gender somehow passes along this magic ability to experience what people at the top experience simply because we share the same genitalia. I get this by osmosis, I presume. You can also use this analogy and swap it out for women, but now let's say that there's this magical 50-50 representation. That woman on the bottom, homeless, with little to eat and no place to stay, is thinking to herself, well, at least my gender is represented at the top, even though I'm still starving at the bottom. So we don't get to eat as an individual because the majority of a given gender is represented at the table, and the only way we fix this is a 50-50 representation. I, as an individual, need to be held back because it's now women's turn to be at the table, even though technically speaking I have never actually had a turn. Feminists will never get this. They will always assume that representation of the collective is more important than individual rights. Don't believe me? At the risk of argumentum ad populum, what is more believable? Some random blog on the internet by some feminist bloggist with 3 followers denouncing this mentality, or a feminist conference where they invite feminists to speak on behalf of the movement like Anita Sarkeesian saying,
focusing on individual women with a very narrow individual notion of empowerment. It erases the reality that some choices that women make have an enormous negative impact on other women's lives. So it's not enough to feel personally empowered or be personally successful within the oppressive framework of the current system. Even if an individual woman can make patriarchy work for her, it's still a losing game for the rest of the women on the planet.
So there are many different kinds of feminists with vastly different opinions, but which ones are the ones with power and influence to feminist organizations that change policy? Oh, that's right, not your feminism. This is why I talk about the visible argument so much and from where influence in policy is coming. Look at the names that represent feminism in this conference. So which has more power to influence law and policy? Feminist blogger number 3 that thinks feminism is just a one-word definition? Or a feminist organization that believes in patriarchy and 50-50 representation, otherwise it's discrimination? So when you hear, it's someone else's turn, they are assuming that you had a turn by proxy, because 9 men and 1 woman eating at a table, despite me being homeless, got to eat by proxy because 9 men were eating. This is what you are saying when you repeat the privilege argument. You are endorsing this mentality and you erase individualism and replace it with collectivism. And that is what is argued by the feminists that have the power to influence policy change. So I ask you, where is the feminist campaigns and feminist organizations rejecting this collectivism mentality? I would like to see that visible argument.